places here. If you have a seat that's open next to you, just raise your hand. If there's a seat next to you. So those of you who are out there, come on in. There are still some seats left. On behalf of all of us here at the bookstore, it's reserved for you. That was an easy one. On behalf of all of us at the bookstore, I just want to welcome you this afternoon for this really, really special event. Because all of us here have just a lot of love for Maggie. I know who you are. Hello. I also want to tell you that we also have started to do something at the bookstore, which many of you might not be aware of, but we do live streaming. So all of this is being live streamed right now. And I'll even give you a minute or two. You can text anyone from China to Europe to New York to let them know to watch right now if they want. And if they go to booksandbooks.com, they can see what's going on right now. And also the flip side of that is that since we have cameras kind of roving the audience, if you're not sitting next to somebody you ought to be sitting next to, just be careful about that. So many of you know that we do a lot of different events, and we have a lot of events going on at the bookstore. To find out what's happening, go to booksandbooks.com, sign up for our emails, and you'll get more emails than you can possibly imagine. You will never feel lonely again if you join our email list. I also want to tell you that just a quick little thing. Next week we have the wonderful novelist Martin Amis coming. So if you'd like to hear him, find out at the desk and they'll tell you about it, among a lot of other authors who will be here. But tonight we celebrate Maggie Silverstein, and to introduce her is somebody who we all know and love, one of the great public servants that we have in this state and just about anywhere. And but yet, he's probably most famous for being that lawyer who did something with Charlie Crist, who got that fan to be underneath the podium. And you can ask Dan about that later on. He is Charlie's consigliere, and he's done good by him so far. So please give a warm Books and Books welcome to Dan Gelbert.
Very nice. Good evening, and whatever you do in life, I'll forever be known as the guy that wrote, yes, we're going to have a fan here on the agreement. And this would be an absolutely inappropriate place to talk about the political campaign. But now that I've heard you're streaming to many places, please vote for Charlie Crist. This is really a wonderful collection, Double Take, and I'm really proud to be here. I am, so you know, Maggie's son-in-law. You need to know that by way of just letting you know that. But it's a wonderful collection of photographs. And by the way, some of my family is in here. In fact, every member of my family is in here. Every member of my family is in this book, except for me. Don't know why she left me out. But I'm not in here, which means this was very brave of her to let me introduce her. But let me, one thing, though, I do want to say about Double Take in this book. This book says as much about its subjects as it does about Maggie. And I think you should understand a little bit about Maggie. I know many of you are old friends, but some of you may not be, or some of you may not recollect some of her past and where she comes from. Maggie was an editor of Tropic Magazine. She has a wonderful resume. She was an editor of Tropic Magazine. She's a great photojournalist. She's adorned book covers. She's a photographer that people in South Florida use and love and cherish. But if you really want to know who Maggie is, I think you got to go back to high school. And this is really important. Maggie was defined in two ways in high school. She was a top cheerleader, and she was an editor of the newspaper. And that should tell you a lot about Maggie and about this book. Remember, a cheerleader is a person who provides the most effusive and unconstrained support for others. And also the one that provides the most thoughtful and insightful questioning of others. And that is who Maggie is, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But you also should know she's the daughter of politicians. She is, but a specific type of politician. Her father, Monroe, was the first mayor of Fayetteville, first Jewish mayor of Fayetteville in the 60s. And her mother, Mildred, was also a city commissioner. And both of them grew up in a time when integration and segregation were the issues of the day in the South. Both of them were clear liberals who believed in integration and who believed in desegregation. And if you want to know sort of where she gets her sense of social justice, which comes through in almost everything about her, I think it's got to be from her parents, who believed that social justice was an important part of anyone's life. I think it also gave her a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding about the journey of others. And that's something that I think if you look through Double Take, Portraits Over Time, you're going to see is very prominent. This is not a book that talks about, it's not a book of glamour photographs. And it's not a book simply about the passage of time between people. It's something much more than that. It reveals lots about personality, lots about relationships, lots about connections. And I did tell you that every member of my family but me is in this book. You know, my daughters, Hannah and Sophie, are here. In the back, there's a series of pictures of the two girls. And when my wife and I looked at these pictures when we first saw them, the first thing we said was, she really caught both their connection but also their independence from each other, which is sort of who they are as children. And that's what's amazing about anybody who's ever gone through a Maggie, Evan Silverstein, let's look at the proofs to see what we want. There's always moments where you go, oh my goodness, how did you find that? How did you capture that? How did you extract that? How did that happen? Because it's not just a person with a camera. It's somebody doing much more than that. And I know exactly how she did it. Go back to her cheerleader reporter days. She makes people feel incredibly comfortable because she is empathetic, she's effusive, she's on their side, they trust her. But she's also a reporter in heart. And she wants to ask the probing questions that extract from her subjects something that reveals the truth about them and about their connections with each other. And that's what you're going to get in this book. You're going to get that history. She gets people to be so disarmed that they just open up in every way. Again, this book says as much about its subjects as it does about Maggie. And I'm pretty certain, by the way, that this entire publication of this book was simply a plot to get a son-in-law to reap high praise on her in public. I'm pretty certain of that, but I will tell you this. I am very proud to be part of this scheme. And let me give you my favorite cheerleader and news reporter, Maggie Evans Silverstein.
Thanks, Dan. I knew I should have gone first. I'm coming up here, I'm thinking of a summer really quite a long time ago, and we're with a bunch of grandchildren, and we're hiking. And halfway into the hike, one of the kids balks. That's it, she won't go any further. So her poor dad has to carry her piggyback up the rest of the mountain until we get to our destination restaurant. And so when her lovely plate of food is in front of her, she looks down at it and she says emphatically, "I hate hiking." Then she looks up with this beatific expression and she says, "I love eating." I want to thank Hannah for allowing me to tell the story because the reason that I tell it is because so many of you have pretty sadly had to hear me talk about having to be a stand-up, which I'm not so crazy about, but here I am. But I can say that I have loved doing this project of Double Take Portraits Over Time. It's just been an absolute joy for me. And oh my gosh, all my friends are here tonight. And I want to thank you so much for coming here to celebrate it with me. Here's pretty much why I've loved this work so much. It's a morning in South Miami. I'm in my studio, and I'm waiting for a client, and he's late. He's really quite late, And so I go into my little studio upstairs, a little porch, and I open the blinds and I look outside on the sidewalk and I don't see him. And then I pace around a little bit, as I tend to do. And then I go down the stairs and stand outside and I look across the street and look around and he's not there. When I go back upstairs, I pull out an earlier folder of his photographs. And the image that I pull out is a picture of him. He's standing on a little chair, and he's leaning over his mother's shoulder, and he's weeping how he wants to go home. Just about this moment, really, I hear footfalls on my stairs, and as I go to open the door, there he is, there's that client, and he's smiling, and he's 6'2", and he has a beard. So I would say about 20 years had gone by since I set up as a black and white portrait photographer in this studio. And this particular kid had really practically grown up in my sight. And now he was on the verge of leaving home. And I had a feeling of how his mother and his father would look at this image of their goodbye boy, if I got it right today. If they looked into his earnest face and they recognized him so thoroughly, they might experience that combustible feeling of sadness and joy, of longing and relief, really what we all feel when touched by the trajectory of our children's lives. My fascination with taking portraits really began when my own children were just on the edge of adolescence. And they'd be sitting in a room and they would turn their head maybe to look at me, or maybe there'd be a certain slant of light on them. And I could really begin to see how they were going to look as adults. And I really wanted to hold on to that present, to hold on to that time, that innocence. And to really be honest with you, I wanted to figure them out. I wanted to understand them better. I mean, why weren't they more contrite, more polite, the way I had been as a girl growing up in the South? Well, I had been taking a photography class at this time, and somehow it seemed like an okay thing for me to look at them with my camera. And somehow that was okay with them because they had their schoolwork and this was their mother's work. And so over time, the changes just began to leap out at me. And so when it came time for them to leave home, I would miss them, but I could still see them in these black and white images, who they had been and who they had become. Also, during a lot of this time, I was working for the Miami Herald, for Tropic Magazine, if anybody remembers Tropic Magazine in its heyday, and it was a wonderful place to work. And I was so fortunate I was able to write essays and to take photographs and sometimes to combine the two. And in fact, the seed for this project, Double Take, began at that time because I took photographs of kids in elementary school, and then my neighbors' kids, my kids, and then as they were graduating high school, I photographed them again. And when we sat around, the editors and the writers sat around the table to come up with a title for this piece, the title was pretty wonderful. It was Adult Essence. So I really was at the newspaper for maybe a decade, and I began to see that really what I loved doing was taking photographs. And as it happened, some wonderful friends were thinking about opening this photography studio. And so I really jumped at the chance to do that. In the studio, people would come to me by word of mouth. And so they would come into the studio, and I had a lot of work up, and they would look at them, and a lot of people would say, why aren't you taking pictures in color? They would say, or they would say, why aren't people smiling more? And those people tended not to make an appointment with me. They didn't come back. But for the people who said yes and wanted me to photograph them, what I would say to them is that a long time from now, when you look at these photographs, what I hope you will say is not how beautiful my son is or how perfect my daughter is, although certainly that was true, but to say that's exactly the way they are. That's just the way they are. And so, and sometimes I'd be in the studio photographing and probably an adolescent, and he'd be doing these kind of dreadful things, like that. So I would stop and I would say a similar thing to him. I would say, or her, I would say, most likely one day you'll be a parent and you'll have a kid this age. And how great would it be to pull out this picture and say, look, that's me when I was your age. So that was pretty helpful. And this wonderful passage began. People would bring their babies to me, and they would be crying, or they'd be giggling, or parents would hold them up in the air, or sometimes they would hold them upside down. And then they'd come back to me. And I actually began to see a correlation between the work I did as a journalist with my notes from an interview and the gazillion contact sheets I had from a shoot. I began to see if I looked at them long enough and hard enough, I could see what was true and what wasn't. So a high school kid comes to me, and he wants a senior picture, and he comes in and he whips off his shirt. And his boxers are coming up over his pants. And so we take that picture, and he's happy with it, and I am. And now he comes back to me. And when he walks in the studio, he takes off his shirt again. But this time, there's this absolutely precious little girl holding on to his leg. And, of course, his daughter. Parents send a child to me for their communion picture. And she's sitting there, her little chin is in her hand, and she's wearing a little white floral thing. What do you call it? Byron, about her head. Yes, and with the lace down the back and her pristine white dress. And when she comes back to me, she's wearing this low-cut, strapless dress. Her hair is cascading down her back, and she's just a ravishing beauty. So what happened is that over time, I would take these kinds of images and I put them side by side. And my stack started to grow. And it's interesting, I never got tired of going back and looking at them. It just always seemed so wonderful and fascinating to me. And of course, that stack of images is what became Double Take. When the time came for me to close the studio and to close this project, I went back to the kids, the growing up or grown-up kids, or to their parents, and ask them to look at the pictures again and to talk to me about childhood. And I think that that's what you'll see that they did so openly and so beautifully. And I would ask them questions. I would ask the kids questions like, what made you happy then? Have you turned out so far the way you thought you would? And what kind of advice would you give someone who's just starting that whole journey of parenthood? And sometimes to the parents I would say, what do you know now that you wish you had known then? And my absolutely favorite answer from a wonderful father was, everything. So now I'm at a place where I'm going to do a slideshow, give you a slideshow with some of the images in the book and some of the commentary. But before I do that, I want to stop and I want to thank the amazing people at Books and Books Press who took this project and turned it into a beautiful book and knew just what to do with it. And I thank you for your wisdom and for your talent. Petra Mason, Osper de Arc, I'm so grateful and I thank you. And there is a third member of that Books and Books Press organization, and that's Mr. Bookstore, Mitchell Kaplan. And I think that every positive, good thing that's ever been said about a person has been said about Mitchell. I really think so. And so, Mitchell, I just want to say ditto. Anyway, I think I am now ready to start the slideshow. So I'll be reading the commentary that was given in interviews from the different kids. Let's see if I can remember which one. And yes, two of my grandchildren on the cover, Will and Julia. Okay, now understand, for starters, I have to come over here and do that. Or, oh wait, maybe I'm doing the wrong way. He said it would take a long time for it's this one, right?
I don't know.
The down. Oh wait, too far. All right, that's me. Moi. Okay. Does anybody need to sit down who doesn't have a seat, or maybe there's? Oh, because there are two seats right here. Oh, and there are also two more seats in the front row. And in the front row. Mitchell, do you see if Dan is here? Is he here? Because I don't want him outside. Bowden. You don't see him? Okay. They were going to try to pick him up. Okay. All right. And Mitchell, maybe some people will be more comfortable standing over there. Come around. Hi, how are you? Hi, sweetie. Yes. Or would you be happier over there? Okay. All right. Okay. I'm ready. You've looked at me long enough. All right, so I'm 10 years old, walking down the Rayford Road in short shorts. I'm 74. I have 12 grandchildren. On any given day, if you should ever sit very quietly and think very quickly through your own history, certain things would pop up, others would lay low. But what would always be true is how fast it goes. All right. Okay. All right. This is Megan, Erica, and Jenny, and this is their mothers speaking. I feel happy when I walk by these pictures. Sometimes, oh, I wish my kids were little again. No. And that moment, it lasts forever. Then the years whiz by. It's a wonderful time and also a grueling time. I was exhausted all the time. For basically healthy children, they weren't always healthy. One of my daughters broke so many bones, if they had done a full body scan, they would have arrested me. We all wish we could have held them longer, but the thing is to be present. One day I was in the house folding laundry. I had hired an au pair who was outside pushing one of the girls on a swing. I had an epiphany. I fired the nanny and hired a housekeeper. I wish I had done it earlier. When I look at these pictures, I'm nostalgic, yet I'm happy for them to have grown up. No? I think I have to walk around each time. Okay. Aha.
Here, you can bring your paper and just stand here, Maggie.
Or move that. I like Mitchell's idea better. All right. This is Peter at 36. You see the little girl. Me, myself, I haven't changed. Obviously, there's more hair on my chest and less on my head. But otherwise, I don't see too much of a difference between these two photographs. I used to go to school. Now I go to an office. I don't see my childhood as over. I still see myself as a kid. I grew up in Miami, and most of the kids I was friends with growing up, I'm still friends with. The same stupid conversations I had then, I have now. I knew my wife at 13. We have pictures of her at her bar mitzvah, at my bar mitzvah. Yes. Danielle at 25. In childhood, you have all the time in the world, and there's always so much support for you. What's hard is always trying to get to that next step. I always wanted to live in New York, to make it to New York, which is where I currently live. I'm more career-oriented than I had expected and love working hard. When I'm not working, I'm an avid trapeze artist. My mom strongly believed that having a full schedule meant I couldn't get myself in any trouble. Even now, I get a bit nervous when I have any downtime. I'm always on the go. I think my parents did a pretty good job. Their philosophy was to let us do whatever we enjoyed doing and take responsibility for ourselves at a pretty young age. Sophie at 12. Sophie is now driving. If you enjoy childhood, it goes by fast. If you're miserable, you feel like it will never end. Adam at 29. When I was young, I'd look in the mirror and think about what I would look like later. When I looked at grown-ups, I thought about the divide. How would I change? It's like a figure 8. There's a loop. Before you go through, it's a complete mystery what the other side will be. I teach children, and I can teach better when I catch a glimpse of myself as a kid. When you look at these pictures together, they make a comment about mortality. Do they know? When you have the luxury of looking at the pictures, it makes the question very clear. Do they live with that director, that compass? Their mother. On his first day home from college, he was playing basketball and broke his nose. He never fixed it. He said he was good with the imperfection. Ryan at 12. The nice thing about being a kid is that you don't have to worry about rent and mortgage stuff. I want to be a forensic detective. My advice to someone becoming a parent is have everything planned out. Don't just play it by ear. Have a job. Be married. Also, try to be there as much as the other parent, so one won't be the more important. Be your kid's friend. Don't try to be with them too much. Give them space if they need it, but not too much. It's kind of confusing. Jonathan, Nicole, and Noel, and this is their mother speaking. In the first picture, the children would not look at each other. They would not touch each other. They hated each other. And look, here with the passing of time, they haven't killed each other. Now, I can look in their faces and see they care about each other. They support each other. At that age, they can't tell their parents that they suffer. You see later that you were so unaware of that. My son just bought a house. It's on a hill, and a high school is close by. I was surprised when he told me he was going to get a big dog. He said the reason is that there's nothing more dangerous than a bored high school boy. You know, you try to stay on top of things, but you miss so much. My son told me, I love how hard you tried, but we outsmart you at that age. Julia at 11, also now driving. What's the same? My face, my organs, my soul. Souls don't change. Your soul is your heart, not your organ heart, but when you love someone or don't like someone. I look more into the past than the future. I know the future is going to come and I can change it, but my past is already there. I think about my memories. I look at my photo albums. Sometimes time goes by so fast. I'm in first period, and then I'm in fifth period already. Georgia at 26. I didn't like wearing dresses. I would scream and cry when I had to. I was a tomboy. Sophie at 24. In the second photo, I look pissed off. Georgia, I look pensive. I don't think I look approachable. Sophie, no, I think you were bored. I'm highly attached to Georgia. Georgia, she's like a puppy. I'm a thinking person, sometimes too much, but now I can turn it off. When I was 7, I did what 7-year-olds shouldn't be doing. I thought all the time. Sophie, when I was little, I thought I'd be powerful. I wanted people to know me. Once you leave home, you're more comfortable in your own skin. Georgia, when I was little, I couldn't imagine being away from my parents. I couldn't spend the night at my grandparents'. I was afraid that something would go wrong at home if I wasn't there. I always thought, what if? At least I'd be there. Sophie, I was desperate not to be a little girl. Georgia, I couldn't make sense out of it. It wasn't pleasant. When you're young, you think that no one could ever understand what you're about. Michael at 17. You can see that we're happy together, that it's a friendship, not just how was school today. Anna and Ariella, their father. I didn't think of them as intimate. There's a 6-year difference in their ages, but when I look at the photos, they seem so close. I like to think that was really there. Still, I understand my limitations in understanding them. I knew time was going by, so I tried to engage with them as much as I could. We talk every day. We're always in touch. When I was growing up, there was a stay-at-home mom and my hard-working dad. My father was present but distracted. I had a happy childhood, but I didn't try to emulate it for my kids. Their mother. Their father was an over-equal parent. I could never read to them. He did. Children were an important choice for us. We'd both gone to law school, worked, and were married 15 years before deciding to have children. We never felt put upon. It was something we really wanted. We'd already been out on Saturday night for 18 years. They're way over the top of everything we think about or worry about. People say, we'd be less anxious if they were settled. What does that mean? Ari, at 23. When I was little, I loved when my dad took me by my ankles and hung me upside down. I call my mom Queen because she meant, and still does, the world to me. This first picture shows how joyful I was. In the second picture, it seems like I'm deep in thought, that I'm curious about the world. I love this picture. I've not lived at home since I was in high school, so I'm used to being away from my parents. Even today, and being so far away from home, I randomly get homesick and think about the days when I could see my parents every day. Now I have a commentary that I didn't get the pictures in. So keep looking at Ari, but if you have your book, you can look on page 33 or do it later. And I love this commentary. It's Molly at 15. It's hard thinking about the future, what you're going to do the rest of your life. Like right now, I'm beginning to look at colleges. I know what I want to do. I like music, and I want a school that will build me up to be the best I can be. But what if I don't get in that school? Did I end up the way I thought I would? When I was little, I wanted to be a nice person and do my best in everything. That's the person I wanted to be, and that's the person I've become. My advice to parents, have your children treat each other as best friends. Keep telling them that. Joan, all my childhood, at every meal, I would eat quickly and go sit on my dad's lap. Maybe he would just be 1/3 of the way done. He would rub my back. It never bothered him. Bernie, I'm put off by my aging, but I have the beauty of my grandson who looks like me. That makes me feel good. Joan, I'm still the baby, and now Max is my baby. Oops. Jonah, at 20, now working at a legitimate job. The first photograph is the best example of what I am. As you go further back, it represents you more. The older you get, the more conscious you are of yourself. When you're younger, you don't remember thinking outside yourself. I like things you don't have to talk about. This is my last one. The photographer, me. Years after I take the second photo of Coleman with his siblings, I receive his wedding announcement. I sent him this photograph of himself in the army jacket, not one his parents chose. Coleman wrote me back, "Thank you for the gift. I didn't have the ability to see it at the time, but it is a fantastic picture. It arrived with my parents the morning after our son Homer was born. I looked at that picture of me and I thought, I remember him. I am still him, of course, but it was helpful to me to see where I was and how much heaviness I carried with me. I've grown into myself and can better carry that weight, whatever it is." So, just to say, when I was putting this book together, I didn't think so much of it as having a message. But when I went back, I read something that the mom of Leah and her 3 brothers said, and for me, it kind of succinctly sums it up. The wisdom is, stop, look. My mom was always at the kitchen sink, dusting the corners. My grandmother was scalding the chicken, plucking the feathers. I think they missed it.
You did so good.
Thank you.
Maggie,
to do a cheer, too. Anyway, I want to thank Maggie for just such a remarkable afternoon. Do you want to take a couple of questions, maybe? If
Sure.
we have a few questions, why don't you send them our way? Anybody?
Would you comment on the sort of the history of photography? Photography is now digital, and that's
Right.
much more friendly to the environment. But what are we losing by having the papers, having the camera, having the film disappear?
Well, for me, I thought I could transition pretty well to digital, but and for portrait taking, it really didn't work out so great for me. I mean, I just love the depth of black and white, and even though you can do that exchange in a digital camera, it just doesn't have the same luminescence for me. And the other thing is that with my bigger camera, my Hasselblad, I had it down on a tripod, and I could keep, you know, a really wonderfully strong connection with whoever I was shooting and be talking to them. And with a digital camera, you are pretty much committed to looking through it. So pretty much in a nutshell that. Although I'm using a digital camera, but for other things.
Question over there.
Maggie, congratulations. I think the book is terrific. A very simple way, and it's told a very powerful story. And I think the use of black and white is great. Having said that, tell me about the input, if any, from the clients in getting their permission to use these photographs. Did they have any choice, or was it your
Sure. You know, what happened with most of my work, and I will say there were twice as many sets of images that I would have loved to have used, but, you know, there was a certain size for this book to be, and I think that was correct. So that was a hard thing, and so I know I'm not quite answering your question yet, but the choice was somewhat arbitrary with the images I chose, and then sadly the ones I didn't. But sure, with so many of my clients, I had photographed them over the years. It was just more the case than not. So with certain families, I may have, from the time the kids were little until they had their own babies, and you know, I was there 20 years, and so I had a relationship, and I think that they trusted me to use their images in a way they would feel good about, and the interviews too.
Question over here.
Maggie, where along the way when you were putting this together did you decide on the title?
Mitchell did. I actually had another title. Well, I should say Mitchell and Petra and Osper. I had another title, and it was Before You Know It. Which you like better?
Sorry. Yours tugs in the heart, Maggie.
Yes.
Maggie, when you started this 20 years ago, did you have in mind, I can't wait for these 20 years to go by so I can do the second life? Or did you just start to say, I'm going to take some pictures, and the 20 years turned out to be a double take, second?
Well, you know, I mean, the truth is that that it was really, my time was over. Digital had come into play so much, and all of this wonderful work that you know, all of our grandkids are doing with what do you call them, cell phones. and a lot of that work shows where a lot of that work is considered art. Museums are using that now. So they stopped making black and white film for my Hasselblad, and so, you know, that was pretty much a message for me.
Was your original motive to take these and then say, I'm going to follow these kids, or did that just happen?
Well, I had some influences that really early on. There's a British videographer named Michael Apted, and some of you may be familiar with a series he did called 7 Up. If you haven't, you can get it on Netflix. It's wonderful. He picked out 7 little kids in London, and he followed them well into their 50s. And it's just beautiful, and you know, and my other influence really was Nicholas Nixon, who has just gotten some press about a new book. And one year at Thanksgiving, he took pictures of his wife and her 3 sisters. And then the next Thanksgiving, he did the same thing. And now he's done it for about 45 years. And you just flip through them, and it's just wonderful.
Here. Maggie, I just was going to ask about the combination of your artistic form as a journalist as well as a visual artist, because the pictures are so special visually, and how those two things connect for you.
Gosh. Not quite sure how to answer that, but I've always liked both of those elements. I've always loved writing, and I always loved photographs. So pretty much that. Nathan?
Some of us have known you for a while and wonder if you're ready for a 3rd generation. You notice the only one in there is your husband is there in a 3rd generation. So do we do Vidor, children, grandparents, children, and
I know why you're saying that. Well, I didn't take pictures of Bernie when he was a kid, so probably not. Probably, I'm pretty happy doing. I'll see, but I'm pretty happy doing images of place, Key West, Ruth's hometown, and so I'm pretty happy doing that. So I see my wonderful friend and press publicist Jessica Jonep here, and I just want to point her out and thank her. She's been heavenly and made this whole ride so easy for me. Thanks, Jess.
We're going to do the signing on the other side.
Okay.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you all for coming. We're going to do the book signing on the other side, and please join us for a reception over there as well. And if you rise, if you can do it, just fold your chair and put it against the wall. That would be great.
We have
Thank you.
lots of wine and food. Say wine and food.
Wine and food is part of that
Wine and
reception.
food. Oh, nice.
Welcome. You did really well.